If someone had told me love could find her between champagne laughter and violin strings, I wouldn't have believed it. A billionaire doctor marries a rebellious girl on a bet only to find out she's a virgin on wedding night. Hey, my loves. Hit subscribe and tap that little bell. Share this story to a person you love, and I believe something really good is going to happen. And don't forget, drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where our beautiful community is tuning in from. Now, back to the story. I never pictured my life swerving like this. I was on the couch when my roommate, who treats troublemaking like a hobby, leaned over with that mischievous grin she thinks is cute but is actually hazardous. She whispered just loud enough for me to catch, "You know she's a virgin, right? Bet you won't last a week." I laughed out loud at first. Who would take a line like that seriously? But then, thanks to my ridiculously competitive streak, curiosity sparked, something sharper, more playful, like a fuse catching flame. A billionaire doctor, poised, sophisticated, maybe a touch arrogant, and, under all that polish, completely human. The idea of marrying her, even as a bet, suddenly felt like the most absurdly thrilling challenge I could imagine. That night I paced my apartment, brain buzzing with ridiculous scenarios. How would I bring it up? Would she laugh me out of the room? Would she push me in ways I wasn't ready for? And what would it be like to share a roof with someone whose life on paper couldn't be more different from mine? By the time I stopped pacing, my roommate had disappeared, leaving me alone with my thoughts, and an unshakable grin I didn't bother hiding. I could almost see her, that defiant smirk, the way she'd tilt her head and laugh while I tried to sell her on the idea that yes, I could handle this. Yes, I could play and win. And winning wouldn't just be about the bet. Deep down, I knew it would live in the tiny victories, stolen glances, late-night conversations sneaking past polite boundaries. In a twisted way, I couldn't wait. I didn't just want to take the bet, I wanted to see her apart from contracts, money, reputation. I wanted to know what made her tick, what made her laugh, what made her real. Maybe, just maybe, I was already halfway there. When she walked into the Aster and Ash, everything else blurred into background noise. Leather jacket tossed over her shoulders, hair tousled like she'd just rolled out of bed, or just didn't care, and that smirk. The one with the power to make me question every decision I'd ever made. Including agreeing to this ridiculous wager. She slid into the booth across from me, eyes glinting with equal parts amusement and challenge. My heart abandoned basic biology and broke into a sprint, hammering at my ribs like it was trying to escape. I tried to concentrate on the words coming out of her mouth. But I couldn't. My brain kept stumbling over itself. Tripping on the curve of her lips, the sharp intelligence in her gaze. The way she casually rested her chin in her hand as if she owned the entire universe. "I hear you like bets," she said finally, voice low, teasing, and filled with a confidence that made me simultaneously nervous and ridiculously excited. "Want to make one?" I blinked, my mouth opened, and then closed again. Because, of course, this was not going to be simple. Nothing about her was simple. The bet wasn't just words on a whim. It was a challenge, a dare, a trap neatly disguised as a question. I could feel the tension in the air between us, heavy and electric, as if it knew neither of us could walk away without getting burned a little. I caught her looking at me, really looking like she was trying to measure every inch of me to figure out whether I would crack or whether I would rise to meet her. And for some insane reason, I didn't want to just meet her. I wanted to win. Not for the bet, not for pride, but for her. I tried to respond, but my voice betrayed me, coming out a little too high, a little too eager. "I think I can handle it." The word sounded weaker than I felt, and I knew she noticed. She raised an eyebrow, that smirk twisting into something even more dangerous, and leaned slightly forward, the kind of movement that made proximity feel like an invitation to sin. "You think?" she teased. "Interesting. I like a little confidence, but we'll see if it holds up under pressure." And just like that, the bet had begun. Not with paperwork, not with signatures, but with a moment, a glance, a challenge. My mind screamed at me to be careful, but my body and every other part of me were already completely and utterly lost. By the time dessert arrived, I realized I hadn't actually eaten anything. All I had tasted was the thrill of standing across from her, the pull of her eyes, and the subtle heat that rose every time she laughed at some joke that may or may not have been about me. And deep down, I knew that if this bet was going to happen, it wouldn't just test my limits, it would reveal them. And somehow, absurd as it was, I was ready for that. A week later, We found ourselves sitting in the glossy, overly sterile office of her lawyer, surrounded by leather chairs, polished wood, and the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Papers were spread across the desk, but honestly, I barely looked at them. My attention was riveted entirely on her. The way she leaned back in the chair, one ankle casually resting over the other. That same mischievous smirk she seemed to wear permanently. The way her eyes gleamed like she already knew every secret I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. "Marriage," she said, picking up the pen and tapping it against the table with deliberate care. "For a bet. But you better not fall in love." Her voice had that perfect mix of mock seriousness and teasing warmth, the kind that could make anyone forget their own name. I laughed, trying to sound casual, but my stomach did that weird, uncontrollable flip thing, like it had a mind of its own and was already betraying me. I glanced down at the papers, saw my name written neatly, the contract as absurd as the situation itself, and realized that despite every rational instinct screaming at me to run, I didn't want to. Not even a little. She noticed the hesitation. "Of course, you're thinking about it too much," she said softly, leaning across the desk just enough that I caught the faintest scent of her perfume. Something floral, sweet, yet sharp enough to make my pulse spike. "Relax. It's supposed to be fun." Fun, right? That's exactly how I describe marrying someone I barely knew because of a bet. Completely fun. Perfectly logical and not at all terrifying. My throat tightened, my hand itched to reach for hers, and I caught myself smiling like an idiot, knowing full well she saw it. "And here I thought I was the reckless one," I muttered, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity. She laughed low and genuine, and it hit me that her laugh alone could make a dull office feel like the most intimate, charged room in the world. She signed first, then pushed the pen toward me with a flourish. "Your turn. Make it official, Roxy." The nickname, Roxy, sent a thrill through me I wasn't expecting. My fingers trembled slightly as I held the pen. The act was simple, the gesture minor. Yet, in that moment, it felt monumental, like signing my name wasn't just a legal requirement. It was an admission, a promise, a small surrender to the chaos she'd already unleashed in my life. I signed. Papers shuffled. We both leaned back simultaneously and I could feel it. The unspoken acknowledgement that nothing about this arrangement would be ordinary. Not the bet, not the contract, not even the ridiculous concept of marriage for amusement. She caught my gaze, eyes sparkling with triumph and something else. Something softer that made my chest tighten. "Now," she said, tilting her head with that infuriating confidence. "Don't even think about falling for me. I have a reputation to protect, you know." I laughed, heart thundering. And for the briefest, most intoxicating moment. The absurdity of it all, the impossibility. And the thrill of standing across from her, signed, bound, and officially part of the same chaotic equation, made me feel more alive than I had in years. And yes, I knew even then that falling for her was the only logical outcome I couldn't avoid. Moving in with her was like stepping into a hurricane that smelled faintly of coffee and leather and somehow made me laugh at everything. The first day was a disaster. Empty wine bottles littered the kitchen counter. Receipts were scattered like confetti across the dining table. And somehow, in the midst of all that chaos, she was sitting on the couch in her usual "I own this space" pose, sipping a glass of water like it was the most natural thing in the world. I groaned audibly. "You can't seriously live like this," I said, picking up a stack of mail and eyeing her with what I thought was righteous indignation. She smirked lazily, not even looking up. "It's called character," she replied. "You're just jealous you don't have any." I rolled my eyes, but secretly felt my stomach flip at the ease with which she teased me. So, I did what any responsible, slightly obsessive person would do. I began organizing labels, color-coded folders, a meticulously planned kitchen arrangement that somehow made me feel like I was trying to tame a wild animal. And in response, she moved one wine bottle back into the wrong place and winked. "Chaos," she said softly. "Keeps life interesting." Days blurred into this strange rhythm. Me meticulously straightening, organizing, planning, her leaving playful chaos in her wake. Yet, every night when the lights dimmed and the apartment quieted down, she would collapse onto the couch, curl into a blanket, and I'd find myself standing there frozen, watching her breathe. Her hair fell in messy waves over her face, soft and unkempt in a way that made her seem human, approachable, real. The smirk was gone. Her lips relaxed, just a subtle curve that hinted at dreams or memories I wasn't privy to. I'd tell myself to look away, to stop feeling the pull in my chest. But I couldn't. I'd sit quietly on the armchair, pretending to read a book, pretending not to notice the rise and fall of her chest. The soft sighs she made asleep took her. And then there were the mornings. Oh, the mornings. She'd burst into the kitchen, hair sticking every which way, pajamas mismatched and slippers missing. And somehow, in that chaos, make me laugh until my sides hurt. She'd throw a sarcastic comment over her shoulder while I scrambled eggs like a maniac. And the way she watched me, half amused, half fascinated, made me realize that intimacy wasn't just the physical stuff I was imagining. It was these tiny shared routines, these fleeting glances, these moments where laughter and comfort bled seamlessly into something I couldn't define but desperately wanted to. And of course, there was the unspoken tension. Every time she reached for something on the counter and our fingers brushed, or when she leaned against me to read the label on a bottle, I felt a jolt. Not just sexual, not just romantic, something deeper, something that tightened my chest and left me strangely vulnerable. She noticed it too, of course. The way her eyes lingered a fraction too long, the smirk that crept onto her lips at just the right time. In those first weeks of living together, chaos became our language. Teasing became our rhythm. Small touches became electric. And somewhere between organizing her mess and stealing late-night glances at her sleeping face, I realized that the bet, the contract, all the absurdity that had brought us here didn't matter anymore because I was already utterly, hopelessly tangled up in her. I was in the kitchen, half-dressed, fumbling with the coffee machine like a complete idiot, trying to convince myself I was busy. But my eyes kept drifting toward her. She was sprawled on the living room couch, hair sticking out every which way, pajamas that didn't match at all. One slipper missing, the other dangling precariously from her toes. She looked completely unbothered, entirely herself, and somehow absolutely magnetic. I didn't realize I was staring until I felt her eyes on me. "What?" she asked, voice low and teasing, walking toward me in that slow, casual way that somehow made every step feel like it was timed just to mess with me. I blinked, caught off guard, and mumbled something embarrassingly lame about early morning reflections. She laughed, that soft, teasing laugh that sliced through any tension, and leaned back against the counter behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off her. My shoulders tightened, my heart thudding in a way that made me feel ridiculous. "Reflections," she echoed, one brow cocked. "Is that what you call staring at me like I'm the last slice of pizza on earth?" I opened my mouth, searched for something clever, and managed only a shrug and a shaky maybe. She rolled her eyes, the smirk widening into a grin, then leaned in. Before I could react, she pressed her lips to my forehead. Not a movie kiss. Not lingering, just gentle, familiar, completely disarming. I went still, chest cinching. It was casual, intimate, and somehow devastating. My brain short-circuited, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. "You're ridiculous," she murmured as she drew back, her fingers brushing mine while she fussed with the sleeve of her messy sweatshirt. "Do you know that?" I wanted to fire back, to tell her she was just as absurd, but the words snagged in my throat. Instead, I watched her sip coffee, idly scrolling her phone, utterly relaxed, utterly herself. And somehow that little slice of every day, the soft groan when the machine hissed, the way her shoulder bumped mine and didn't move away, felt more intimate than any grand gesture or midnight confession. "Seriously," I managed at last, voice a bit unsteady. "You have no idea what you do to me." She glanced up, eyes half-lidded, a twitch at her mouth. "Oh, really? Enlighten me." I don't know," I admitted, embarrassed. "It's everything, the way you move, the way you talk, how you make a mess and somehow make it look intentional, how you—" I cut myself off, hearing the ramble. Her laugh, louder now, full of mischief, filled the kitchen. "Wow, that's a lot," she said, sliding closer until her hip knocked against mine. "You're going to embarrass yourself if you keep talking like that." And then, almost without thinking, she leaned in and kissed me. Not long, not slow, just a brush of lips that somehow stopped time. My knees nearly gave out. It was intimate in a way I hadn't braced for, casual, personal, utterly electric. When she pulled back, she didn't say a word, just smirked and left me there, chest pounding, trying to convince myself it was normal to feel betrayed by my own body over a forehead kiss. I watched her flop onto the couch, sipping her coffee like nothing had happened, and I understood something. I didn't just like her. I was completely caught up in her. The little moments, the accidental touches, the way she let me see her soft side without even realizing it. And I couldn't stop smiling, even though I knew she was watching me. Already amused by how utterly predictable I'd become in the best possible way. It started over dinner, or more precisely, whose turn it was to make dinner. And if you asked me a week earlier, I would have said that arguing about something so stupid was beneath me. But living with her was nothing like I expected. And apparently patience was not one of my strong points anymore. "I'm making dinner tonight," she said casually, lounging against the counter like she owned the place, scrolling through her phone. Hair sticking out in every direction, one slipper missing, the other barely hanging on. That smirk of hers, the one that could make me melt in a second, was firmly in place. "Nope. I'm cooking," I snapped, waving my spatula like it was a weapon of war. I think my voice was louder than intended. She looked at me amused like I was a child throwing a tantrum. And I felt my blood pressure spike even more. "Oh, really?" she said, raising one eyebrow. "You think you get to decide because what? You feel like it?" "Yes, and also because I'm starving and I don't want to starve next to someone who clearly thinks breakfast for dinner is a lifestyle choice." I shot back. She threw her head back and laughed. Sharp, playful, infuriatingly intoxicating. "Starving? You literally ate 3 donuts this morning." I had a moment of weakness. I countered. "A moment. And you know what? You would have eaten them all if I hadn't." We went back and forth like this, ridiculous accusations flying across the kitchen like improvised weapons. Empty wine bottles teetered on the edge of the counter. An unwashed pan from last night threatened to slide onto the floor. And somewhere in the chaos, she nudged me accidentally, and I felt a jolt in my chest that had nothing to do with the argument. "GH, you're impossible," she groaned, throwing her hands up in defeat. Though the corner of her mouth twitched with that smirk I both loved and hated. "And you're lazy," I yelled, dramatically pointing with my spatula. For a moment, we just stood there staring at each other, red-faced, chest heaving, neither willing to back down. And then it hit us, the absurdity. We both froze and my brain, probably trying to save me from humiliation, realized we were screaming over pasta. And that's when we lost it. First came the snorts, trying not to laugh, the shoulders shaking with the effort. Then the giggles turned into full-blown laughter, tears forming at the corners of our eyes, my hands gripping the counter as I bent over because I couldn't stop. She laughed so hard she fell back onto the floor, grabbing onto my arm for support. Her head tilted back, hair all over the place. And I swear it was the most beautiful, disarming thing I'd ever seen. Eventually, we collapsed onto the couch together, tangled up under a shared blanket, still giggling, faces red from laughter, hearts racing, not from anger, but from the ridiculous intensity of it all. I rested my arm around her shoulders and she leaned in, cheek brushing mine. It was quiet then, intimate in a way, yelling at each other never could be. "I don't even remember what we were fighting about," she murmured, voice soft now. Playful warmth replacing the earlier fire. "Dinner," I said, trying not to grin, though I failed miserably. "Right. We're ridiculous," she said, nudging me gently with her nose. And I realized she was right. Completely ridiculous. But somehow, curling up next to her like that, listening to her soft breathing, feeling her warmth against me, I finally understood a truth I hadn't admitted before. Intimacy wasn't just kisses or whispered confessions. Sometimes it was arguing over a stupid thing, laughing until your stomach hurt, and holding each other close when the world was too loud outside. I didn't just like her anymore. I was slowly, undeniably falling for her. And every absurd, messy, chaotic moment we shared only made it harder to resist. It started with small things, little touches that seemed innocent at first. Her hand brushing mine while reaching for a glass. A stray hair falling across my face that she never bothered to fix. A smirk that lingered just a second too long. But then it escalated. She began sneaking kisses, short teasing ones, on the back of my neck while I washed dishes on my cheek when I was reading a document. Even on the tip of my nose when I least expected it. At first, I tried to play it cool. I told myself, it's just a game, just the bet. But every brush of her lips, every teasing glance, every mischievous smile chipped away at that rational thought until it felt meaningless. I found myself chasing her around the apartment, pretending to be annoyed, but secretly loving the thrill of it. She would dart past the kitchen, laughing like I'd just insulted her in the funniest way possible. And I'd reach out, catching her sleeve, spinning her around, only to have her slip from my grasp with a laugh that made my chest tighten. "Give it up!" I yelled one evening, breathless, cornering her by the couch. "Never!" She shot back, grin wide, eyes sparkling, hair falling into her face in that messy, perfect way that drove me insane. We stumbled into each other constantly, bodies brushing, laughter spilling out so loud it echoed through the apartment. And every time our skin touched, even for a second, my heart would start racing like a drum solo, reminding me in the most obnoxious way that I was completely out of control. It wasn't just physical, though. It was the way she knew exactly what to say to make me smile when I didn't want to. The way she teased me about my habits, the way she watched me cook or clean, her eyes lingering just long enough to make me wonder if she saw more than I thought she did. One night, we were in the kitchen and she kissed me while I was stirring the pasta sauce. Short, teasing, barely enough to count as a kiss. I froze, spatula clattering onto the counter. "You're predictable," she said, smirking, leaning against me just enough to make me feel heat rising in my chest. "I what?" I stammered, face burning, heart hammering. "You think you're in control, but you're not," she said softly, brushing a thumb along my jaw. And I like that. It hit me then. I wasn't in control. Not of my heart, not of my reactions, not of how she made me feel. The bet, the entire point of this ridiculous marriage, was irrelevant. I wasn't trying to win anymore. I wanted her. Every laugh, every brush of her fingers, every playful bite to my lip was a reminder that I was already falling. And the truth, I didn't want to stop falling. By the end of that week, it was a game neither of us could resist. The apartment had turned into a playground full of stolen kisses in hallways, whispered jokes across rooms, and touches that lingered just long enough to drive me insane. My rational side kept whispering, "Remember, this is a bet." But my heart was screaming, "Who cares? This is real." Every chase, every tease, every intimate moment left me more tangled up in her than the last. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, I realized I wasn't just enjoying the game. I was falling in love, utterly, irrevocably, and with no intention of stopping. It was late, way past midnight. The city outside our apartment was quiet, the usual hum of traffic replaced by occasional distant sirens and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. We had been sitting on the couch, half watching some mindless show, who neither of us was really paying attention to. She had her legs tucked beneath her, a blanket over her shoulders, and I, predictably, was staring. I kept trying to smother it, to hide what I felt behind jokes, teasing, little challenges. But that night something in me snapped. Maybe it was the way her hair slipped across her face when she laughed, or how she reached for my hand without thinking. Or maybe it was the quiet between us, soft, weighty. I think I like you," I blurted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "More than I probably should." She stilled, tilted her head, one brow lifting. The usual smirk softened into something gentler, more considering. "You mean? Like a lot?" she asked, voice teasing but calm, like she didn't want me to notice her heart was probably racing too. I nodded because language failed me. My chest felt both too tight and strangely hollow. I wanted to say it wasn't just the kisses or touches, that she made ordinary moments feel extraordinary, but I didn't. I just nodded and hoped she understood. For a beat she said nothing, only watched me. Then she laughed, warm, quiet, and tension melted out of my shoulders. My knees actually wobbled. "You're ridiculous," she whispered, leaning closer. Her fingers found mine, brushed, lingered. "Do you know that?" "I know," I said, low. "I'm aware." Her grin returned, small, victorious, and then she kissed me. Slow, deliberate, long enough for the world, the bet, the contract, all the chaos to fall away. I forgot to breathe. The defenses I'd spent weeks building, flirting, chasing, arguing, crumbled under the weight of that kiss. When she eased back, her forehead rested against mine, eyes half closed, wearing that infuriating smile that makes my heart feel like it might explode. "So, you're mine now, huh?" she murmured, teasing again but soft, intimate. I let out a shaky laugh, still gathering air. "I think, yeah, I'm yours. Completely." She kissed me again, shorter, playful, her mouth brushing mine like a reminder that confession doesn't mean the game is over. It just meant it had changed. The entire night seemed to stretch out infinitely, full of soft touches, lingering glances, and quiet laughter. I realized something in that moment. We didn't need perfection. We didn't need clarity. And we didn't need rules. All we needed was this: honesty, intimacy, and the willingness to let ourselves fall, even if it was terrifying. By the time we finally pulled away, I was dizzy. Not from the kiss, not from the adrenaline, but from how completely irrevocably I was falling for her. And judging by the way she was leaning against me, smiling, holding my hand like it was a lifeline, I knew she was falling, too. The wedding was over. The champagne had run dry. The last song played, and somehow we had survived the ridiculous chaos of the day without completely killing each other. For a brief moment, I thought I could breathe, relax, and finally be alone with her. The hotel room door clicked shut behind us, and the world outside seemed to vanish. Dim lighting, soft music from the minibar speaker, the faint scent of roses from the bouquet she'd carried. Everything was perfect, intimate, and a little overwhelming. I thought I knew her. I thought I was ready for this. She kicked off her heels and flopped onto the bed with that infuriating grin. "So, this is it," she said casually, like we were just roommates settling in for a movie night. "The big night." I swallowed hard. My mind raced. "You got this. Just be calm. Be confident." And then she looked at me. Her eyes catching the low light, and blurted the words that froze me in place. "I've never done this." I froze. Literally froze. My mouth opened, closed, and opened again. I had no idea what to say. My brain short-circuited as I tried to process it. Her eyes, wide, slightly embarrassed, slightly amused, held mine, and I could feel my pulse racing in my ears. And then I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not because I was mocking her, not because it was funny in a cruel way, but because the situation was absurd, intense, terrifying, and somehow completely us. The laughter bubbled up, uncontrollable, and she blinked at me, confusion mixing with that smirk that had caused this whole chaos in the first place. "You're laughing?" she asked, incredulous, sitting up and tugging the blanket around her shoulders like a shield. "Yes," I admitted, still giggling, voice shaky. Wow, I didn't see that coming. Honestly, I thought I had you figured out." She rolled her eyes, but I caught the corner of her lips twitching into a smile. "So, you're laughing at me?" "No, I'm laughing with you," I said quickly, crawling onto the bed to sit beside her. This is terrifying and amazing and completely new. And yes, I'm laughing because I'm nervous." "Okay, you caught me off guard." She nudged me playfully with her shoulder. "You're ridiculous," she said softly, and suddenly the tension in the room shifted. Her embarrassment softened, her gaze holding mine in a way that made my chest tighten. We sat there for a long minute, inches apart, neither of us moving. I reached out slowly, hand hovering over hers, letting her decide whether to take it. She did. Her fingers laced with mine, tentative at first, and then with more confidence until the simple touch carried more weight than either of us could put into words. I leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's okay," I whispered. "We'll figure it out together. No pressure. No expectations, just us." She laughed softly again, a nervous, vulnerable laugh this time, and rested her head on my shoulder. "I think I can do that," she murmured, "with you." And in that moment, all the fear, all the uncertainty, all the weight of what the night should be melted away. We didn't need a perfect plan, a flawless performance, or even complete confidence. We just needed each other, and that being together, laughing, holding hands, letting ourselves be completely exposed, was already enough. I kissed her forehead, then her temple, feeling her relax into me, and thought, this is just the beginning. Chaos, laughs, tenderness, everything. And I wouldn't trade a single second of it. We didn't exactly do anything that night. Not in the way the movies promised. Not in the way I had imagined a wedding night would go. Instead, we ended up sitting on the edge of the bed, legs tangled in blankets, coffee cups from room service strewn across the floor, and talking and talking. It started with small things: what we wanted for breakfast tomorrow, whether the Vesper Sky Pool was worth checking out. But slowly, the conversation slipped into the kind of honesty that only comes when you're completely alone with someone who already knows too much about you anyway. Whispered confessions, silly little admissions, teasing memories from the past, and of course, playful digs at each other. "I can't believe you still eat cereal like a 5-year-old, she said, smirking as she kicked her legs under the covers. "Yeah, well, at least I don't leave laundry in the living room for a week like someone I know." I shot back, nudging her shoulder. She laughed, head thrown back, eyes sparkling. And for a second, I just watched her, amazed at how completely unguarded she was. That's when it hit me. Intimacy wasn't just about sex or even kisses. It was every small, vulnerable thing we did in front of each other. The accidental brush of her hand against mine as she reached for a pillow. The way she leaned into me when she laughed too hard. The softness in her voice when she whispered a memory she hadn't shared with anyone else. I caught her staring at me at one point. Eyes curious, almost nervous, and my stomach flipped. "What?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my voice betrayed me. "You just look serious when you're thinking," she said, tilting her head. "And it's kind of cute," I laughed nervously, brushing my fingers against hers. The contact was brief, accidental, or maybe intentional. But it sent a thrill through me that I didn't try to hide. She smiled, leaning slightly closer, and suddenly our knees touched and then our hands. And then everything felt electric in the quiet intimacy of the room. We spent hours like that, talking, laughing, teasing, and accidentally discovering more about each other than I thought possible. The awkwardness of being newly married, the expectation of what should happen on a wedding night, it all dissolved into a shared understanding. We didn't need a script. We didn't need to rush anything. Just being together, letting ourselves be open, was enough. At one point, I leaned my head against hers, our hair tangled, our fingers still intertwined, and I realized how easily I had let my guard down, how safe and warm it felt to be utterly vulnerable with her. She whispered something funny about our chaotic first week living together, and I laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple without thinking. "See," she murmured, smiling. "We're already ridiculous. And I kind of like it." "Yeah," I said, smiling back. "Me, too, completely." And that night, surrounded by soft blankets, messy hair, and whispered confessions, I understood something I hadn't before. Intimacy wasn't just physical. It was every shared smile, every playful tease, every accidental touch, every laugh and sigh that made us trust each other enough to be seen completely unapologetically and without fear. I fell asleep that night tangled with her, realizing I had never felt more at home in someone's presence before. And somehow I knew this was just the beginning. The morning light poured through the half-open blinds, spilling golden stripes across the bed and catching dust in the air like tiny floating stars. I woke slowly, tangled in the blankets, and immediately felt her warmth beside me. She was still half asleep, hair sticking up in all directions, one pillow squashed under her head, the other barely keeping up with her sprawling limbs. And yet somehow she looked perfect. Her eyelashes caught the light just right. Her lips curled into a sleepy smile, and the way her chest rose and fell made my heart ache in the best possible way. I froze for a second just watching her. Not because I didn't know her, but because I finally saw her in all this calm, all this softness, without the chaos or teasing or running around the apartment. It was different, intimate in a way that wasn't loud or dramatic, but somehow more powerful than anything we'd done before. She stirred, blinking slowly, a drowsy grin spreading across her face. "Morning," she murmured, voice husky and soft, still tangled in blankets. Her hand brushed mine like it was nothing, but the touch sent a jolt straight through me. "Morning," I whispered, barely audible. I didn't move, not yet, because I didn't want to break whatever this was. She yawned, stretched overhead, and accidentally knocked a slipper off the nightstand. I snorted under my breath, shaking my head. "You really can't do anything quietly, can you?" "Hey, it's part of my charm," she murmured, smiling sleepily. "Besides, you don't mind?" I leaned in and pressed a light kiss to the crown of her messy hair. "No," I admitted. "I don't mind at all." That was when it hit me, fully, completely. The bet, the absurd contract, none of it mattered anymore. It had been an excuse to get here, but now it didn't count. She was mine in a way that startled me, that knocked me off balance, that filled my chest with a warm, impossible ache. Not because of a wager, not because of logic, because I wanted her, needed her, and, apparently, she wanted me too. She shifted closer, curling in, and whispered, almost shy, "You're still staring." "I can't help it," I said honestly, tracing my thumb along her arm. "You're incredible." She laughed, soft, drowsy, intimate, and I forgot to breathe for a second. "Well, lucky for you, I like being stared at." I kissed her, slow, lingering, careful this time, tasting every second of it. She answered right away, tugging me nearer, and for a few blissful moments the world beyond the hotel room disappeared. It was just us, the warmth, the easy laughter, the nearness. The way our fingers laced like we were tethered by something stronger than a contract, stronger than a dare. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads rested together, smiles small and real. "You know," she murmured, "I think I like this whole morning after thing." "Yeah?" I said, trying to sound casual while my pulse thudded. "Yeah," she breathed, tilting her head, eyes bright in the morning light. "Especially when it's with you." I kissed her again, briefer, playful, but full of promise. Holding her close, watching sunlight skim her face, I knew one thing for certain: whatever began as a bet had become something real, messy, chaotic, intimate, and utterly ours, and I couldn't wait to see what followed. The days after the wedding felt unreal. Somehow the chaos of our first week under one roof softened into something quieter, more intimate, no less intense. We still laughed. We still teased each other, relentlessly. We still stole kisses in the kitchen, bumped into each other in hallways and wrestled over blankets on the couch. But now the stakes felt different. There were no bets, no games, no let's see who can annoy the other the most. Just her, just me, just us. I caught myself staring at her more than I should. The way she leaned against the counter while I made coffee. The way her hair fell into her eyes as she read a text. The subtle smirk that would creep across her lips when I did something absurd. It all made my chest tighten. And the funny thing, she noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. One evening, I found her sitting cross-legged on the couch, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, scrolling through her phone. I plopped down beside her, careful not to touch her yet, because I wasn't sure if she wanted it or if I just needed it. "You're quiet today," she said without looking up. Teasing as always, but softer somehow. I'm thinking I admitted my fingers hovered over the edge of the blanket and then slowly I reached out and brushed her hand. She looked up at me, eyes wide, slightly nervous about us. She smiled small and knowing, and leaned in to rest her head on my shoulder. "Oh," she murmured. "And what exactly are you thinking?" I swallowed, feeling a flutter in my stomach that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with her. "I'm thinking that I don't want this to be about the bet anymore. I don't want to win you or prove anything. I just want you." Her head tilted, fingers curling lightly around mine. "You mean really want me? Like actually?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Completely. Totally. No games, no bets, just us." "You?" She laughed softly. A warm full sound that made my heart ache in a delicious way. Then, in a move that had me melting instantly, she turned fully toward me, resting her forehead against mine. "Well," she whispered, voice teasing and intimate all at once. "That makes things a lot simpler, doesn't it?" I nodded, leaning in, brushing my lips across hers in a soft, lingering kiss that carried all the honesty I'd been holding back. Her arms wrapped around me, and suddenly, all the teasing, all the chaos, all the playful battles felt like they had led us here. Into this moment of complete vulnerability. The next few days became this weird, beautiful rhythm. Mornings started with breakfast together, lingering touches, and stolen kisses across the kitchen. Nights ended tangled in blankets, sharing whispered confessions, soft laughs, and gentle caresses. Every small touch felt significant. Every playful shove, every brush of her hand against mine, every smile across the room became a declaration I didn't need to say aloud. I realized something important. I didn't want the thrill of winning anymore. I didn't even want to play games. I just wanted her. Her laugh, her smirk, her messy hair in the morning, her hand brushing mine when she thought I wasn't looking. I wanted every ridiculous, chaotic, tender, intimate piece of her. And in a quiet moment, as she rested her head on my chest while I traced circles on her arm, I understood something I hadn't admitted before. This us was no longer about a bet. It was real, deeply, completely real. And I couldn't imagine ever going back to anything less than that. It was the first time we went out in public as married. And I realized instantly that being together officially publicly felt completely different from just living in the same apartment. The city felt louder, the air sharper. But somehow having her by my side made it all feel manageable, thrilling even. We had chosen a small, cozy Italian Astor and Ash tucked away on a quiet street. Soft lights, low chatter, the scent of garlic and fresh bread lingering in the air. She squeezed my hand the moment we walked in, and I felt a flutter in my stomach I hadn't felt since. Well, since I first laid eyes on her in that leather jacket all those weeks ago. As we sat down, she leaned across the table, eyes glinting with mischief. "So, now that we're married," she whispered, barely audible over the soft jazz playing in the background. I'm going to steal your heart. I nearly choked on my water, coughing awkwardly while my face heated up. Excuse me? I sputtered completely off guard. She just grinned that infuriating, dangerous smirk, leaning back with a look that said she knew exactly what she was doing. I said, I'm stealing your heart, she repeated, voice playful. And you're not allowed to stop me. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to regain composure, but my chest was pounding like a drum. Hand in hand, I couldn't stop noticing her. The way she tucked a stray curl behind her ear, the subtle arch of her brow, the soft curve of her lips as she bit them to suppress a grin. Every detail seemed amplified now that we were public. Every glance between us carrying the weight of all the intimacy we'd built over the past weeks. The waiter came by and she leaned in close, whispering, I'm thinking we should get dessert first. Dessert? I asked, eyebrows raising. Yes, she said, winking. Because I want to taste it with you. I nearly dropped my drink again. I didn't know whether to laugh or groan. You're impossible, I muttered, shaking my head, but my hand squeezed hers under the table, a silent surrender to her charm. And that's when it hit me. None of this was about the bed anymore. None of it. The contract, the challenge, all the playful games, they were meaningless. Now, this, the quiet, intimate, playful moments in public, the stolen winks, the hand-holding, the teasing whispers was real, pure, and I was completely hooked. She caught my gaze mid-sip of water, her eyes sparkling, and leaned closer. You know, she whispered, voice low. Being married suits us. I laughed softly, leaning my forehead against hers. Yeah, I admitted. More than I ever expected, she grinned, brushing her thumb along my knuckles. Good, because I don't plan on giving your heart back anytime soon. And in that moment, sitting across from her in a quiet Aster and Ash, hand in hand, heart hammering, I realized something simple but profound. I didn't just want to be married to her. I wanted to exist in her world, to be tangled in her chaos, to laugh, tease, and love her in every small, ridiculous, intimate way I could imagine. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of shared bites, whispered jokes, accidental touches, and lingering glances. By the time we walked out side by side under the street lights, the city felt smaller, somehow quieter, because I had her, and that was more than enough. Weeks had passed since the wedding, and by now we had settled into a rhythm that was messy, chaotic, intimate, and perfect in the most unexpected ways. Mornings full of stolen kisses, afternoons spent teasing each other over coffee. Evenings tangled in blankets sharing whispered confessions. I thought I had it all figured out, at least as much as anyone could figure out someone like her. And then, one ordinary evening, everything flipped. We were in the kitchen cleaning up after a late dinner we'd laughed over when she leaned against the counter, watching me wash the dishes. Her eyes were sparkling with that infuriating smirk that always meant she was about to do something and I should have known better. So she said casually as if she were talking about the weather. Remember that whole bet thing? I laughed, rolling my eyes. Oh God, don't tell me you're still going to, tease me about it. Nope, she said, voice soft but sly, stepping closer, so our shoulders brushed. Actually, the bet. It wasn't real. I froze, sponge in hand, feeling like the room had suddenly tilted. Wait, what? She laughed. A low, warm, mischievous laugh that made my stomach flip. Yeah, I orchestrated the whole thing. Every little challenge, every dare, every ridiculous fight, it was just to see if you choose me. Not the thrill, not the game. Me. I blinked, then blinked again. My mind raced, trying to process the revelation. You what? You set all of this up? She nodded, smirk widening. Every part of it. The living together, the teasing, the stolen kisses, the arguments over pasta, all of it. I knew you'd fall eventually. I just wanted you to fall because you wanted me, not because you were trying to win. I laughed and then I laughed again hard. Belly aching, tears forming, laughter that shook my shoulders and made her lean back against the counter, still grinning. You genius, I said between laughs, shaking my head. You actually outplayed me with love. Wow, I can't believe it. Her eyes softened slightly, losing the playful glint for a moment as she reached for my hand. I had to make sure, she whispered. I had to be sure that this us was real, that you wanted me and not some silly thrill of a bet. I took her hand, pressing it to my chest. You got me, I admitted, voice low, still smiling. Completely. I fell hard and apparently exactly the way you wanted. She laughed softly, leaning her forehead against mine. Exactly. We stood there for a long moment, hands intertwined, breathing the same air, hearts racing in sync. The absurdity of it all, the chaos, the laughter, the bets, the stolen kisses. It was suddenly hilarious. Love had won. And we had been utterly, gloriously outplayed. Okay, I said finally, still laughing. I have to admit something. You're dangerous, she grinned. That perfect infuriating smirk back in place. I know, but you love it. I do, I whispered, leaning in to kiss her, long and slow, full of all the disbelief, affection, and raw emotion that had built up over these weeks. And she kissed me back like it was the only thing that mattered in the world. For the first time, I realized that the bet didn't matter. The contract didn't matter. All that mattered was us completely, messily, ridiculously, and perfectly. And I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. It started with rain. Big drenching rain that had us both running through the streets, laughing like idiots, shoes soaked, hair plastered to our faces, and coats doing absolutely nothing to protect us. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, neon signs reflecting in puddles, the sound of cars splashing through the streets blending with our laughter. It was chaotic, messy, and somehow perfect. We had been walking aimlessly after dinner, arguing playfully about whether we should hail a cab or just run to the apartment. She grabbed my hand mid-laugh, tugging me into a small alley to avoid a puddle the size of a small pond. But I didn't mind getting wet. I barely noticed. I was too busy watching her. The way the rain clung to her lashes, the mischievous sparkle in her eyes, the curve of her lips that made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. And then without warning, she stopped. Just like that, her hand tightened around mine and she tilted her head, looking at me as if she were daring me to breathe. You know, she said, voice low, soft but teasing. I wanted to see if you'd really care about me. I blinked, rain dripping down my face, heart hammering in my chest. Excuse me? I asked, though I had a feeling I knew what was coming. She stepped closer, soaked coat clinging to her, hair plastered against her cheeks. Not the dare, she whispered. Not the bet, not the thrill. Just me. Did you care about me? My stomach flipped. My chest soared. My entire body seemed to buzz with this delicious, chaotic energy. And then, before I could think, I kissed her. Hard, messy, clumsy, perfect rainwater mixed with the heat of our lips pressed together, hands tangling in soaked hair, clothes sticking uncomfortably. But I didn't care. She kissed me back immediately, laughing softly against my lips, shivering and clutching me like I was the only thing keeping her upright. We staggered slightly, almost tripping over a puddle, but didn't break apart. Every second felt like the culmination of every stolen touch, every teasing glance, every ridiculous fight and playful chase we'd shared over the past weeks. When we finally pulled back just enough to breathe, she rested her forehead against mine, soaking wet, eyes glimmering in the street lights. I needed to know, she murmured. I needed to know that you'd choose me. Not the bet, not the dare, just me. I cooped her face in my hands, thumbs brushing over raindrops streaking her cheeks. I always would, I whispered. You don't have to test me. I choose you. Always, she smiled. And it was that smile that made my heart feel like it might actually burst. Good, she said softly, leaning in to kiss me again, slower this time, tender and deliberate. Because I already chose you. We stood there in the rain, soaked, laughing, kissing, holding each other like the rest of the world didn't exist. And in that moment, I realized something. This us was real. Completely beautifully real. No bets, no dares. Just messy, chaotic, clumsy, perfect love. And I never wanted it to end. Life after all the chaos, the wedding, the confessions, the rain-soaked kisses, the reveal that the bet had never been real, was nothing like I expected. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Fully messy, fully chaotic, fully alive, and I wouldn't trade a second of it. Mornings were my favorite. I'd wake first like usual and watch her sleep for a few minutes. Messy hair sticking out every which way, one leg draped over the blanket, half her face pressed into the pillow. She looked so peaceful it made my chest tighten, and I'd just stare, trying to memorize the curve of her cheek, the way her lashes rested against her skin. Eventually, she'd stir, murmuring something incoherent, reaching for me in her half-asleep way, fingers brushing my arm. I'd tug her closer, laughing quietly, and she'd hug me tight, pressing her face into my chest. "You're ridiculous," I'd mutter, grinning, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you love me for it," she'd reply, voice husky from sleep, eyes still half closed. A lazy smile forming. The apartment was never tidy. Never. Wine bottles left where they didn't belong. Shoes scattered across the floor. Empty snack wrappers in places I'd never expect. And somehow I still found myself tidying it. Rearranging the kitchen. Folding her shirts. Straightening the couch pillows. But it wasn't annoyance driving me. It was love. The kind of love that makes you want to put in the effort. Not because you have to, but because being part of her life, every little chaotic piece of it feels essential. Afternoons blurred into each other, filled with little routines that weren't routine at all. Cooking together, her leaning against the counter, teasing me as I chopped vegetables, sneaking little kisses whenever I wasn't looking, watching shows we didn't actually care about. Curled up on the couch, legs tangled, laughing at nothing in particular. Playful arguments over trivial things. Whose turn it was to make tea, who left the blanket on the floor. Whether we should order takeout again. And yet, every laugh, every brush of hands, every teasing glance made me feel more connected to her than anything else I'd ever known. Evenings meant wandering the city together. Hand in hand, letting her drag me down side streets she claimed were secretly magical. Stopping at food trucks she wanted to try, or just sitting on a Marigold Park bench, sharing fries, and making ridiculous jokes until our stomachs ached. She still had that smirk that could disarm me completely. The one that made me drop my coffee sometimes, and she knew it. I pretended to be annoyed, but really, I loved it. And the intimacy wasn't always in grand gestures. It was in small things. Her leaning her head against my shoulder while we walked. My fingers brushing her hair from her face while she pretended not to notice. Shared glances across the kitchen table while she stirred her coffee. The way she'd press her hand to mine during a commercial break. Every one of these moments mattered. Every touch, every laugh, every tiny connection made our world feel tighter, warmer, unshakable. She still challenged me in the most infuriating ways. She'd leave a glass on the counter, daring me to notice. She'd stash the snacks I'd specifically told her not to touch. She'd throw down tiny challenges, goading me to chase her across the apartment, murmuring teasing comments just loud enough to turn my cheeks red. And I'd chase, I'd spar back, I'd laugh until we were both breathless, then fold into her arms, utterly routed, utterly in love. One morning, watching her sprawled across the bed, half awake, she muttered, "You know, you're exhausting." "And you love me for it," I said. Leaning in to kiss her temple, tracing my mouth along her jaw. She shivered, smiled with her eyes still heavy, and wound her fingers into my hair. "Yeah, I do." That's when it hit me, all of this, is what love actually feels like. Not just dramatic confessions or cinematic rain-soaked kisses. It was her messy apartment, our playful fights, my hand in hers while she cooked, drifting off with her head on my chest, laughing until our ribs ached. Ordinary, chaotic, imperfect, and ours. I pressed my forehead to hers and wrapped her tight. "You've completely won," I whispered. "I know," she murmured against my chest, smirking, "and I plan to keep winning." As she curled into me, I realized something simple and true: this was the real beginning. Not the bet, not the games, not the turmoil of those first weeks. Just us, messy, chaotic, ridiculous, intimate, hopelessly in love. Every morning, every laugh, every kiss, every accidental brush of skin reminded me of one thing: she was mine completely, and I was hers. And that was enough. More than enough.